Once upon a time, there was one of the most politically incorrect characters in WWE history, with a sulphurous gimmick that was only possible in the Attitude Era madness at the end of the 90s, the one of an adult movie star. It's a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise with this new series in 2 episodes to tell you the amazing story of Val Venis, pro wrestling's porn star. You will learn, among other things, how a 7 a.m. phone call from Vince McMahon changed his life, the completely unlikely story behind the creation of his character and his name, but also how he ended up behind the bush with the world's most famous erotic actress, the mind-blowing reason why some scenes with her were not broadcast, and even the secrets behind the big success of his first Monday Night Raw appearance. And you will never guess how he called his penis or for what reason one of his colleagues wanted to cut it off. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, Val Venis, wrestling's adult movie star, episode 1. Let's go!
Choppy, choppy, yo! Beep, beep!
On August 3rd, 1998, nearly 6 million viewers were watching one of the most unlikely scenes in Raw history. Poor Val Venis, one of the wrestlers who had the biggest reaction from the crowd, was being mauled by the bad guy Yamaguchi-san and his Kaientai faction. The latter had only one idea in mind: to choppy Val Venis pee-pee, as he said, a funny way of saying that he wanted to cut off his penis with his katana. While he was going to do it, the show ended abruptly without us knowing the outcome of this high-tense situation, in what is one of the craziest cliffhangers in pro wrestling history. Did the WWE erotic actor get castrated? And more generally, how did we come to this situation, which is as surreal as it is captivating? Hang on tight, it's time to go back in time and understand how Val Venis found himself in a position where he seems about to say goodbye to his penis. Nobody could have imagined that the man named Sean Morley would become wrestling's adult movie star. This Canadian, who was born on March 6, 1971 in Oakville, became passionate about pro wrestling when he was a kid, having in particular been impacted by the match between Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik. And he went to train in a specialized school. Then, from 1994, he had multiple experiences, and not only in Canada, where he met a certain Adam Copeland, who will be better known as Edge. It is especially in Mexico, under the name of Steel, and while being masked, that he will really make a name for himself at the Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre. It is an experience that has also served him in his personal life, since he was forced to learn Spanish there to communicate with his colleagues. And we imagine that he was very happy to be a Spanish speaker when he met his future wife, a Mexican named Lourdes. In 1997, after 3 years of adventures, he caught the eye of the WWE and World Championship Wrestling, the 2 biggest wrestling companies at the time, who both wanted to recruit him. And besides, imagine that the official Bruce Pritchard went to see Sean in Mexico and that they ate lion together that day. The amazing thing is that he had to choose between the 2 federations, and that it was at the time of his WCW tryout, where he was able to talk with Chris Jericho, who was still working there at that time, that he made the choice to go to the WWE instead. Indeed, Jericho advised him not to join this company. Morley says that he felt real cliques in the locker room, where several visions collided, unlike WWE, in which he felt the big vision of Vince McMahon. The fact is that after a tryout for the latter's company in Des Moines in Iowa, he had quietly returned home to Mexico when one fine morning at 7 o'clock he received a phone call that would change his life. What was going to be offered to him on the phone was a real revolution for his career. But before we got to that point, WWE still fumbled a little with him. When Jim Ross, who was in charge of talent relations, considered that the Canadian was ready to start in the main roster, it was the writer Vince Russo who was in charge of finding a gimmick for him. Can you only imagine that Russo first offered Sean to form a team with his friend Edge, which would have been called the New Midnight Express, in reference to the Midnight Express tag team that was popular in the 80s, and that the 2 men would have been renamed Adorable Adam and Sensual Sean. they weren't really excited about this idea. And it's worth noting that in real life, Morley was Edge's brother-in-law at that moment, since the future Rated R superstar had married Alana, Sean's sister. So then, Russo spent some time with Morley to find a gimmick that would suit him. And while talking to him, the writer said to himself that Sean talks a lot about politics, but that he would be unable to write storylines for him if it became his gimmick, because Russo considered himself ignorant in this field. On the other hand, he said something else to himself, and it's surprising to say the least. Hold on tight. He thought that Morley looked like an erotic movie actor. And so we come back to that phone call he received one fine morning. At that moment, he picks up the phone. It was Vince McMahon, who put the speaker on because Vince Russo was with him. He tells him, "We have this character for you, and we want to run it by you and see if you're comfortable with it." Sean is intrigued, and what Vince offers him at first doesn't appeal him so much. The gimmick of a movie actor. Sean thinks to himself, this is something that has already existed, a wrestler who plays in movies and uses it for his character in the ring. He thinks back, for example, to Hollywood Hulk Hogan, who has already done it. But then, we are witnessing a correction, and not the least. McMahon clarifies to him that it is the gimmick of an adult movie actor, and that changes everything. Morley tells himself that he would be the first to have such a role. While the WWE boss wanted to give Sean some time to be sure that he was comfortable with this idea, he didn't need to do any pros and cons. On the contrary, probably working with beautiful girls in a great company. What more could you ask for? But if Vince was so keen that he was comfortable with his gimmick, it was because he said that if he wasn't, this character could never work. And precisely, Russo had found a name for this role as an erotic movie actor who is retraining in wrestling. Val Venis. How did he come up with this name? It's very simple. He wondered which word rhymed with penis. On the other hand, we could have a concern, and that was also the case for the official Bruce Pritchard. Didn't this ex-movie actor character condemn Sean Morley to the mid-card of the shows? Wasn't it going to stick him with a label that wasn't necessarily very rewarding for the rest of his career? Could he do the WrestleMania main event, for example? All these questions are absolutely legit, and I invite you to stay until the end of this first episode to explore them together and discover the rest of the very amazing journey of Val Venis. From March 30th, 1998, for WrestleMania season at the WWE, Val Venis is going to make a tremendous arrival, and the vignettes of him that were broadcast for several weeks were excellent in my humble opinion, and you will see that they clearly did their job on the viewers. First of all, I want to emphasize how clever the strategy was on the part of the company before making Val Venis debut in the ring. They took the time to introduce us to a character with no less than 6 vignettes that each lasted between 1 and 2 minutes, and a final vignette that was a kind of compilation of the previous ones, all over almost 2 months. And I must say that there's no better way to enable everyone to get acquainted with the wrestler, his little universe, his goals, his personality, his way of speaking. And in this case, the identity that these vignettes gave off was incredible. Through a succession of very simple scenes, whether he was in bed watching his latest adult movie, in the shower with some ladies, or in his car, we could see that Val Venis was a man who did multiple sexual innuendos by speaking slowly with some quite explicit sounds, and not only his own. By the way, he was talking about penetrating the WWE. We had a final sign with tiger stripes in the background that said Val Venis was coming. And another element that I find funny is that he called his thing the Big Valbowski. By adding to all this a little adapted ambient music and references to pop culture, since it mentions the actors Bruce Willis and Jack Nicholson, you have all the ingredients to create maximum hype in my eyes. These vignettes promise a funny, entertaining character, and Val's performance, in terms of self-confidence, despite the difficulty of this challenge, is truly remarkable. In these vignettes, we are also struck by the attention to detail. Look at this bottle of wine in the background, this painting which represents a tiger, these pillows with animal motifs, this alternation with black and white shots which break the fourth wall in a way, but is coherent since the character seems to be used to film sets. There is one vignette in particular that has aroused the interest of viewers even more. The one in which Val Venis spoke about his new movie, Val Venis, Soldier of Love, where we saw him behind the bush with an actress, and not just anyone, Jenna Jameson. It was none other than the most famous erotic actress in the world in 1998. A real performance from the company in terms of exposure and media coverage, since this Jenna Jameson was a real celebrity, with movies that broke records in terms of sales and autobiography that was a bestseller in America. Clearly, Val Venis was put in the best conditions to succeed in the company. And yet, you will see that this vignette with Jenna Jameson almost wasn't broadcast at all. First of all, you should know that all these vignettes were shot in 48 hours in Bruce Prichard's house, and Jenna Jameson's participation almost jeopardized Prichard's relationship with his wife. Indeed, Bruce was more or less the technical intermediary between the Federation and Jenna. So he was the one she called to set everything up, and since she lived in California in another time zone than him, it was midnight when she called. And Bruce's wife was not so happy when she discovered that a certain Jenna was asking to speak to her husband late at night. And at the time of the shooting, Bruce's wife saw Jenna walking around almost naked, and apparently he hadn't told her that she was an ex-actress. We'll say that it was a new experience for the Pritchards. But the worst part of this whole story is that when Vince McMahon discovered the vignettes with Jenna Jameson and Val Venis, in particular the one in the bathtub, he wasn't a fan of it at all. He thought Jameson had the face of an adult movie star, to which Bruce Prichard replied that she was an adult movie actress. Obviously, McMahon had no idea who she was, and he thought the vignettes were trashy. It's only because Prichard told him that these vignettes with Jameson would help the character of Val Venis, since she was the most famous actress in the world, that the boss agreed to broadcast only one. The others will not have that privilege. According to Vince Russo, McMahon didn't find Jenna Jameson attractive, and it would be for that reason that he didn't want to broadcast all the vignettes. Fortunately, despite the boss's tastes, the character of Val Venis was able to benefit from a series of high-quality vignettes, and you will see that all his first months in the main roster will be just as entertaining and funny. So get the popcorn out, because the best of Val Venis is yet to come. On May 18th, 1998 in Nashville, it was the night for Val Venis. It was time for him to debut in the ring on Raw. And what's absolutely amazing at the moment when we watch him arrive on the stage with music that perfectly reminds the erotic side of his vignettes is the reaction of the crowd, who gives him a standing ovation. But what's even crazier is the number of signs for him. We must realize that such a welcome and such a support from the fans is usually for already well-established superstars. With Val Venis, we have the impression of seeing someone arrive that the spectators all know and already love, while it was only his first appearance. I must say that I find the whole staging around his entrance very good. We have a rather purple lighting, but we also see on the Titantron images from his vignettes alternating with images of hot dogs, some kind of big explosions. We clearly understand that this is an adult movie actor character, with also the little dance that he does, this towel that he has around his waist, an attitude that the ladies seem to like. At the beginning of his theme song, we will obviously notice the phrase, "Hello, ladies," with his deep voice. Could we only imagine a better catchphrase to immediately set the tone and be remembered by the fans? For the record, it's a catchphrase that was found during the shooting of the vignettes, So it comes from the magic of the moment, where excellent ideas were often created in wrestling. And imagine that Val himself confessed that this "hello ladies" helped him a lot with women at that time. Looking at the reception that the crowd offered him on May 18, 1998, we can say that Val Venis' debut is perhaps the perfect illustration of how a careful general presentation can make all the difference. As Vince Russo explains, "It took weeks and weeks of work to make Val Venis' debut perfect. It's no coincidence that, when he stepped into the ring for the first time, the audience went into raptures. These are not things that are improvised overnight." Russo considers this setting up of the Venus character to be an example. He says that he himself has never seen someone so popular at his first appearance in an arena. And he also didn't expect Venus to be loved so much, since he was supposed to be a heel who divides men and women in the audience, initially. Another positive point that we can notice in this first match of Venus is that he not only has a credible physique, but also in-ring qualities, where we find this adult movie identity, we'll say, through his little moment when he still does his dance above his opponent, and especially his finisher. He goes on the top rope to then come and destroy his opponent who is on the mat. And the name of this move is perhaps the most politically incorrect one ever, since they called it the money shot, a term that comes from the pornographic world and which designates the final apotheosis of an adult movie. And the funny thing is that Val Venis himself didn't know what it was for several months, and that Vince Russo, who had imagined this name, hadn't bothered to explain it to him. It was only while talking in the car with his colleagues that Val grasped the subtlety. It's also with Vince Russo that they imagined the promos that he will start doing before his matches. Among these moments that were often hilarious, we can mention gems like, "The big Valbowski is like a Rubik's Cube. The more you play with it, the harder it gets." Or even, "I came, I saw, and I came again." Whether we like or dislike this kind of humor, we can only recognize that it's edgy and refreshing. What also made these short promos so entertaining was that they were not only the work of Vince Russo. They were not sentences that Val Venis had to recite. On the contrary, he could put his own creativity into them. It was a co-creation. And besides, about these jokes, the WWE boss told Val that when he created what could be described as punchlines, he had to make sure that the adults understood them, but that the children wondered why everyone was laughing. A desire that Venus interpreted as a way of still keeping a certain morality in the shows. In any case, I found that this character really has a very strong identity, that he seems totally natural and full of confidence. He seems to feel good in this role and to have fun with it. And we can affirm that he fits perfectly into this big Attitude Era madness. At the end of July, he had his first pay-per-view match at Fully Loaded, a show name that seems more than appropriate to make an adult movie star debut. He will win there in just under 8 minutes against Jeff Jarrett. This match was especially an opportunity for him to develop his first real storyline against the villain Yamaguchi-san, who was on commentary. A surprising story, to say the least, that could be titled "The PP Strikes Back." At the moment when Val Venis began to hit on Yamaguchi-san's wife, in his own way, he certainly didn't expect to find himself in a truly incredible and unprecedented scene in pro wrestling history a few weeks later. Were his seduction attempts going to provoke the castration of his penis by his rival and his lackeys? Anyway, it was the summer of 1998, and Val Venis had his first real storyline in the main roster. And the least we can say in this angle is that the two sides were going all in. When the villain Yamaguchi-san was taking revenge for what the erotic actor did to him by lusting after his wife with a beatdown, Venis retorted by presenting his new movie, Land of the Rising Venus, a relevant title considering that his enemy was Japanese. In this new video, we simply saw him in bed with Miss Yamaguchi, which upset the Japanese. Look at his acting, which is really hilarious. In reaction to this, the woman will be punished by being forced to get down for a beating, but Val Venis will come to save her. The Japanese will later threaten to castrate him by playing the scene that awaits him with a big sausage and a katana. We will recognize Funaki, who will be much nicer in the future. In the end, Val Venis will indeed be kidnapped by Yamaguchi-san and his troublemakers in what will be one of the most original endings in the history of the Red brand. The erotic actor, after having been violently destroyed to the point of being out, is taken inside a room. Then we discover a few moments later that he has been tied to the ceiling and undressed. As he had said in such a childish way, the despicable Yamaguchi-san was ready to choppy his pee-pee with his saber. But then the light goes out and the show ends without us knowing what happened. The only way to find out for the 5.8 million viewers who were glued to Raw at that moment will be to be there next week. A show that they will therefore want to see even more thanks to this epic ending. This is what we call a successful cliffhanger, just like in TV shows. Something we often had in the Attitude Era shows, and a detail that probably helped the viewers to want to come back to WWE every week. So, was he castrated or not? You will have the answer and multiple twists in episode 2. In the next episode, you will learn, among other things, what internal change in the company deeply impacted the Val Venis character, to the point of ending up having a new gimmick that was the extreme opposite of a porn actor who was imagined to parody one of the company's real-life enemies. You will also discover the hilarious joke that his compatriot Owen Hart did to him while they were at a hotel. But also how he almost joined the legendary G-Generation X clan, and even how a tragic event in his life led him to get into the marijuana business. And you will never guess what the former diva Sunny whispered in his ear a few hours before a show, or what funny bird he had to collaborate with one day, a person he described as being one of the dumbest he had seen in his entire life. In any case, we could see how Sean Morley became Val Venis, and all the secrets behind the creation and the successful launch of his sulphurous character. It's also interesting to note that from the time when he was wrestling in Mexico in the rather acrobatic universe of Lucha Libre, the Canadian considered this style to be gymnastics, in which there wasn't an emotional connection with the fans. He had already understood that in order to be remembered, and not just by the name of his moves, he needed a real character. And we can imagine that his vision of things must have influenced him when accepting to become Val Venis, the one who is also an experienced biker and who once wanted to become a helicopter pilot, perfectly symbolized a much more adult and politically incorrect WWE, which was also inspired by the mainstream culture of that time, since we can mention that the movie Boogie Nights with Mark Wahlberg, which was released in the fall of 1997 and which had grossed no less than $43 million at the world box office without even being a blockbuster, already told the story of a young man who became a pornographic industry star. And precisely after learning more about Val Venis' career, I have a debate for you. Do you think that the Stamford Federation should be inspired more by the successes of the moment in the entertainment industry to attract as many viewers as possible to its shows? Come talk about it in the comments. I'm very curious to know what you think about it, and it will be exciting to share our feelings. We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?